Okay, think about this. What if the biggest invasion in history, like the biggest, almost didn't happen just because of the weather?
Right. Or imagine it succeeding, partly because of an army that wasn't even real, a ghost army.
Exactly. Today we're diving deep into a moment that genuinely changed everything. D-Day,
Hmm.
June 6th, 1944. You know, the massive Allied landing on the Normandy beaches in northern France.
U.S., British, Canadian troops, and others too. France was occupied by Nazi Germany at the time, so this was it, the big push.
And our mission today, yours and mine, is to get past maybe the images you already know.
Yeah, we want to pull out some of the surprising details, the crucial context that really shows why D-Day is often called the beginning of the end of World War II.
We've got all this source material, and the idea is to help you make sense of it, get informed without getting totally lost in all the dates and names.
Let's make it make sense.
Okay, so setting the scene, Germany had northwestern France pretty much locked down since, May 1940, a brutal occupation.
Yeah, for years. Then the Americans jump into the war, December 41, and almost right away, the U.S. and the Brits, especially leaders like Roosevelt and Churchill, they knew a major invasion across the English Channel was, well, essential.
It wasn't just an idea, it was the plan, really.
Absolutely, from the get-go. But the thing is, the Germans weren't totally in the dark about this.
Right.
But late 1943, November, Hitler himself is getting nervous about an invasion threat. He puts Erwin Rommel, a big name in charge of defenses.
Rommel, the Desert Fox.
That's the one. His job? Finish building the so-called Atlantic Wall, this massive 2,400-mile network of bunkers, mines, obstacles on the beaches, in the water, everything.
2,400 miles.
A huge undertaking.
Yeah.
They knew an attack was likely coming. They just had no idea where exactly the Allies would hit.
Which, brings us to the sheer scale of what the Allies were doing back in England, while Rommel's building this wall.
They're building an invasion force. It's staggering.
Yeah.
7 million tons of supplies. Think about that.
7 million tons, including 450,000 tons of ammunition alone, all shipped to England just to get ready.
How do you even hide that? It seems impossible.
Well, that leads right into the deception, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Operation Fortitude. Pure genius, really.
Hmm.
So, General Dwight Eisenhower, Ike, he gets appointed the top commander for Operation Overlord in January 44.
Overlords being the code name for the whole Normandy campaign, D-Day was just the start.
Precisely. And before D-Day, the Allies run this incredible deception campaign. The main goal: make the Germans think the real target was Pas-de-Calais.
Which is the narrowest point across the channel. Makes sense they'd think that.
Exactly. Or maybe even Norway. They use all sorts of tricks. Fake inflatable tanks, dummy landing craft, a whole phantom army group.
The one supposedly led by Patton.
Yeah, George Patton, right opposite Pas-de-Calais. Plus double agents feeding false intel, fake radio signals. It was incredibly elaborate, all designed to make the Germans focus their best troops away from Normandy.
So you've got this massive buildup, this huge deception plan. The tension must have been just unbelievable. Eisenhower originally picks June 5th, 1944 for the invasion date.
Right, and it almost fell apart right there. Really bad weather rolled in, stormy conditions.
Can't launch the biggest amphibious invasion ever in a storm.
No way. It forced a 24-hour delay. Eisenhower only gave the final go after his chief meteorologist, a group captain named James Stagg, predicted this brief window of better weather for the next day, June 6th.
Imagine making that call, the fate of the world hanging on a weather forecast.
Incredible pressure.
And as that moment finally arrived, Eisenhower's message to the troops, it still gives you chills. He said, "You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade. The eyes of the world are upon you."
Powerful words for a monumental task. And just think about the numbers right before they launched. Over 5,000 ships and landing craft heading for France.
5,000, carrying all those soldiers and supplies.
And then overhead, more than 11,000 aircraft ready for air cover and support. It was just immense.
Yeah.
Armada, really.
So the night of June 5th turning into June 6th, it begins.
Yeah.
But not on the beaches first, right?
Correct. First came the airborne troops. Thousands of paratroopers, guys in gliders, drop behind enemy lines in the dark.
That was their job.
Secure key bridges, crossroads, exits from the beaches. Basically, disrupt the Germans and stop them from rushing reinforcements to the coast once the main landing started.
Okay, and then the beach landings kick off, 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, the amphibious assault. And the experience was really different depending on which beach you hit. The British and Canadians at Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches, they faced, relatively speaking, lighter opposition.
And the Americans at Utah Beach, too, initially less fierce?
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
But Omaha Beach, That was a different story entirely for the U.S. forces.
That's the one you always hear about, the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan.
Exactly. Heavy, heavy German fire. Difficult terrain, that seawall, those high bluffs. They faced veteran German defenders dug in. It was brutal.
Casualties were horrific there. Over 2,000 Americans just on Omaha. A desperate day-long fight just to get off the beach and take out the German guns up on the cliffs by nightfall.
A true meat grinder.
Yeah.
Yet despite everything, by the end of that single day, June 6th, something like 156,000 Allied troops had made it ashore onto those Normandy beaches.
An incredible achievement. But the cost? Estimates are over 4,000 Allied dead on D-Day itself. Thousands more wounded or missing.
A staggering price for that foothold. And what's also amazing is how quickly they built up forces after D-Day.
Right, the follow-up was key.
Absolutely. Less than a week later, by June 11th, the beaches were fully secured. And by then, they'd landed over 326,000 troops.
Wow. In under a week.
Yeah, plus over 50,000 vehicles and about 100,000 tons of equipment. The logistical effort was just relentless, pouring resources ashore.
And you hear these personal stories, too, that go beyond the numbers, like Frank DeVita, a Coast Guardsman on the USS Samuel Chase. He talked about just lowering that ramp again and again, watching guys run into that hell on Omaha Beach. Haunting.
It puts a human face on it. And it's important we remember, too, nearly 2,000 African-American soldiers were part of that initial D-Day assault force. Their contributions often get overlooked, but they were there, fighting.
Definitely. So while the Allies are struggling ashore and pushing inland, what's happening on the German side? You mentioned confusion.
Massive confusion. And it was amplified by a few key things. One was Rommel himself being absent. He was actually back in Germany for his wife's birthday, believing the weather was too bad for an invasion anyway.
Bad timing.
Terrible timing for them. But even bigger was Hitler's mindset.
Yeah.
Because of the Allied deception, Operation Fortitude.
The Ghost Army in Pas-de-Calais.
Exactly. Hitler was utterly convinced Normandy was just a diversion, a feint. He thought the real bigger attack was still coming, north of the Seine River, likely at Calais.
So he held back reinforcements.
Critically, yes. He refused to release nearby panzer divisions, the armored tanks they desperately needed to smash the beachheads. He hesitated for hours, even days.
That delay must have been crucial for the Allies.
Absolutely decisive. Plus, Allied planes were pounding key bridges inland, making it really hard for any German reinforcements that were released to actually get to the front quickly. They had to take long detours.
And Allied warships offshore were providing vital covering fire for the troops on the beaches too, right?
Continuous, effective naval bombardment. It all added up. German confusion, Hitler's misjudgment, Rommel's absence, Allied air and naval power. It gave the Allies the critical time they needed to establish themselves ashore.
So they get ashore. But the fight wasn't over. The battle for Normandy itself lasted for weeks, right? Through that French countryside.
Yeah, the weeks following D-Day were incredibly tough fighting. This wasn't open terrain. They were pushing through what's called the bocage country.
Hedgerows.
Exactly. Thick, ancient hedgerows on top of earthen banks dividing up all the fields. Each field essentially became a little fortress for the Germans to defend. It was slow, grinding, dangerous, close-quarters combat.
Really tough going.
Very tough. But the Allies kept pushing. By the end of June, they'd captured the vital deep-water port of Cherbourg, which was huge for bringing in more supplies.
And the numbers just kept growing.
Phenomenally. By late June, around 850,000 Allied soldiers and 150,000 vehicles were in Normandy. They were ready to break out and really start the push across France.
And that breakout happened by the end of August 1944.
The Allies had reached the Seine River. Paris was liberated, an incredible moment. And the Germans were effectively cleared out of northwestern France. That really marks the end of the Battle of Normandy.
And sets the stage for the final phase of the war in Europe. Allied forces getting ready to push into Germany itself, planning to link up with the Soviet Union's armies coming from the east.
Exactly. The pincer movement was closing.
So looking back at D-Day itself, its significance is just enormous, isn't it?
Undeniable. It absolutely turned the tide against Nazi Germany on the Western Front. It was a huge psychological blow to the Nazis, a massive boost for the Allies.
And strategically.
Critically, it tied down huge numbers of German troops in France. It prevented Hitler from shifting those divisions east to try and stop the Soviet advance. Without D-Day, the war, especially on the Eastern Front, could have looked very different, perhaps lasted even longer.
So it directly helped lead to Germany's final defeat.
Directly. It paved the way for the final campaigns that led to Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945. which, came just a week after Hitler himself committed suicide in his bunker.
Wow, when you lay it all out like that.
It's staggering. D-Day was, at the time, the largest single amphibious invasion, the largest naval, air, and land operation in history, a testament to planning, bravery, sacrifice, and inter-allied cooperation. It truly was the turning point in the West.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. Consider how those seemingly small details we talked about, a weather forecast, right? Or this incredibly elaborate deception with a phantom army.
Yeah, things that could have gone wrong or things that worked perfectly.
How they played such a massive role in the outcome of this world-changing event. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do those hidden factors, those unpredictable moments or clever plans shape the big events in our own world, or even in our own lives in ways we don't always see?